And at this time, please join me in welcoming Sonika, our Hey Asia focal point, who will moderate the opening session. Over to you, Sonika.
Thank you, Ashley. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the participants joining from different parts of the world. My name is Sonika Poudel. I am the Asia Regional Focal Point of the Hey campaign and your moderator for the opening session on empowering the future, sustainable healthcare, and empowering the future, sustainable healthcare, and youth leadership today. Now, we will be having an intergenerational dialogue among our panelists. We have an amazing group of panelists today. So I would like to welcome them now on the floor for the panel discussion. Our first speaker is Courtney Sunna, who is the Director of Global Community Investment and Young Health Program at AstraZeneca. Our second speaker is Mr. Aliyu Sadiq. He is the Africa Regional Focal Point of the Hey campaign. And our third speaker is Ms. Naomi Cambridge, who is the Caribbean Regional Focal Point of the Hey campaign of Lashley Foundation. So welcome panelists to the floor. And now I would like to request Aliyu and Naomi to ask their questions to Courtney. And now, Naomi, we'll start with you now.
Thank you so much, Sonika. Like Sonika said, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of the participants and all of the other panelists and moderators. I'm so excited to be here today. So I'll just jump right into my question for Ms. Sunna. So the healthcare sector is, of course, known to produce a lot of waste. So what role do you think that the healthcare industry can play in accelerating progress to address climate change and helping to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals?
Thanks, Naomi. And hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today and see so many faces from all around the world. So inspiring. So to answer your question, at AstraZeneca, we recognize that healthcare systems are a significant contributor to climate change. The healthcare sector is responsible for around 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. For example, pollutants in the air can enter our lungs and our blood system, and short-term exposure can exacerbate existing conditions like asthma, but long-term exposure can cause chronic conditions like lung cancer. And treating patients with the healthcare that they need to manage these conditions can actually be an energy-intensive process that produces greenhouse gases and then contributes to the climate crisis. It's also important to note that air pollution is an equity issue. While air pollution affects us all, society's most vulnerable groups, like women, children, elderly people, minorities, indigenous communities, people living in poverty, and people with pre-existing health conditions, they often face a disproportionate burden. But ultimately, the best thing we can do to break the cycle to improve the health of the planet is to keep people healthy, and clean air plays a big role in that. So we're taking bold action on climate because we recognize that there is a strong connection between healthy planet and healthy people. We're using a science-led, patient-centric approach to deliver better healthcare outcomes with a lower environmental footprint. And our ambition is to work across the sector to accelerate the delivery of net zero healthcare. We have a flagship Ambition Zero Carbon program, and we're on track to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from our own global operations by 98% by 2026, and are on the way to being science-based net zero by 2045 at the latest. A few years ago, we launched our AZ Forest program to help restore nature and biodiversity. And by the end of last year, over 10.5 million trees had been planted. This year, we expanded the program, announcing a new commitment to plant 200 million trees worldwide by 2030, restoring over 100,000 hectares across 6 continents. But it's not a road that we can travel alone. Partnership is critical to achieving not only our own goals, but the climate crisis and the Sustainable Development Goals. Through public-private partnerships, we're working with our peers, not only across the pharma industry, but with the WHO, academia, and other partners to accelerate the transition to net zero health systems and improve individual health, societal health, and planetary health. The good news is that solutions to address climate change exist, like switching to affordable and cleaner energy, cooking, and lowering transport emissions. And these can often also deliver rapid and substantial health benefits. Back over to you, Naomi, or Sonika.
Thank you, Courtney. I believe Aliyu has a question for you. So Aliyu, over to you.
Hi, Courtney. Thank you for that. My name is Aliyu Sadiq. I'm preparing you now for PowerPoint for the campaign. With over a decade of experience and a proven track record of developing improved healthcare and disaster response systems, what have you found to be the most challenging, particularly when developing these systems to extremely vulnerable communities? And how have you overcome these obstacles?
Yeah, thanks, Leo. I think your question, your audio went out a little bit, but I think it was around improving healthcare and disaster response systems and what has been the most challenging aspect of that. Certainly when it comes to disaster and humanitarian response, the most challenging aspect is when emergencies strike locations that are already grappling with longstanding crises, whether it's armed conflicts, displacement, regions affected by climate change, or the erosion of essential infrastructure. That then renders it a dual crisis, and the impact of the emergency is then multiplied. And it makes the situation far more complex than any single disaster and exposes new vulnerabilities to societies that were already grappling with enormous challenges. For example, the earthquakes that recently struck Turkey and Syria earlier this year struck an area that was already dealing with over a decade of civil war, and that just worsened the existing humanitarian crisis. And amidst the darkness of these crises, there have been beacons of hope. Humanitarian organizations work tirelessly on the ground and have exemplified resilience, resourcefulness, and the ability to adapt to the evolving needs of affected communities. They demonstrate that even in the most challenging circumstances, there's always a path forward to providing much needed assistance and support. So to enhance the effectiveness of response efforts, we take a multifaceted approach. The first point is to strengthen the coordination among the humanitarian organizations with local authorities and international partners. This collaborative action with shared objectives and mutual support is vital to ensuring a comprehensive and integrated response that addresses both the immediate needs while also looks at long-term recovery and development. And the second point is to prioritize the building of local capacities and resilience by empowering local communities to actively participate in their own recovery is paramount. By providing training, resources, and opportunities for self-sufficiency, we can not only respond effectively to the immediate crisis, but also help lay the foundation for long-term stability and development. We also ensure that we're working with organizations that prioritize the needs of the most vulnerable groups, helping to ensure access to healthcare information and services, and responding in the most efficient way possible, even in the face of these dual crises. We find that it's our collective responsibility to provide them with the support that they need and deserve.
Thank you for your answer, Courtney. And meanwhile, I would like to request our participants that if they have any questions, they can drop the questions in the chat box. We have a Q&A later, so our panelists will answer your questions later on the Q&A session. So you can drop the question in the chat box now. So following up on the questions by Aliyu and Naomi, I would like to ask them that in your opinion, how can the healthcare industry contribute to addressing the climate-related health challenges? And what hurdles have you faced as a young climate leader? And how have you overcome them in order to make a significant impact? And there are many young participants today in this call with us. So what advice do you have for the other young people who are interested in climate advocacy and leadership?
Okay, so I guess I'll jump in there. So it's kind of a big question that you asked just now. There's a lot of different little questions in there. So I'll just start with the first one in relation to how the healthcare industry can contribute to addressing climate-related health challenges, is I think what you had first asked. By definitely first viewing climate change as a public health issue and not solely as just an environmental issue, because of course it is an environmental issue, but quite frankly, we are in a global health crisis with climate change. And when we start to view climate change as a public health emergency in the same way that we viewed the COVID-19 pandemic as a public health emergency, we are then incentivized to adjust our healthcare systems to suit, right? So the healthcare system is very aware of how to treat climate-induced health issues, like the ones that Courtney had mentioned earlier, like asthma and other respiratory diseases, other things that are influenced by environmental degradation, but they need to be made aware of the ways in which they can actually mitigate those issues altogether, and how the healthcare industry might actually be contributing to the prevalence of those healthcare issues. So for instance, hospitals produce around 5 million tons of waste each year in medical materials, not to mention the amount of energy and water usage that is used just to help these institutions function. And of course, all of this impacts the changes in our planet and the subsequent diseases and ailments that happen. So if we transform how the healthcare institutions actually function at the root, we're able to facilitate more sustainable, clean, and climate resilient systems, which in turn contribute to mitigation of climate-related health challenges that we are facing. So in terms of the question about, I think it was hurdles that have overcome in youth climate leadership, there have definitely been quite a few. Time management is definitely one of them. Experiences of climate anxiety and climate apathy have definitely been things that I have experienced. So time management, being a leader in youth climate advocacy, it's a lot, because a lot of climate activists or climate youth leaders in general don't only do youth leadership, because it's not, for some it is a full-time job, but for many youth leaders it's not really a full-time job. We still have school, we still have work, we have internships, clubs, just generally figuring out our life as most people are at this age. So time management is definitely a struggle when you're in this field. So just my strategy to overcoming this has definitely been prioritizing what's important that day, taking everything one step at a time and day by day is something that I really pride myself on keeping up, because if not, then everything would start to crumble. So another thing, climate anxiety and climate apathy. Climate anxiety has definitely been something that has been talked about quite a lot in recent times. So I feel like, yes, it's an important issue, but I just don't have time to elaborate on it right now. So I want to lean towards climate apathy, because that's something that's not really talked about as much. And just to have everybody understand what climate apathy is, it's basically a situation that happens when, which probably a lot of people experience, when you're looking at all of the climate change news and all of the problems, and everything seems so insurmountable and so overwhelming that, especially people my age, since it's our future, we have experiences of feeling hopeless. We have fatigue when we think about our future and how we can even preserve it if we even have a future. And then when people start to feel hopeless, they stop fighting for change. And that's something that can be really dangerous, because it just exacerbates or even quickens the issue that we are facing right now. So finding ways to combat climate apathy, combat climate anxiety have definitely been a struggle at times. One of the ways that I found best to overcome that is that I was able to see other activists, not only in my space, but also globally, continuing to fight, and then also actively appreciating the progress that has been made, even if it is minimal, which is why it's also so important to showcase the good climate news alongside the bad, because of course it's very important to advocate for the issues that are going on, the bad issues, but it's also important to highlight that there is progress being made. There are people doing things. There is good news out there, because like I said, once people start to feel hopeless, they will stop fighting for change. It's just how people are. So yeah, those are some of the things that I've experienced. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm going to pass over to Aliyu to see if he has anything to add as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that, Naomi. And when you look at the healthcare system, just like Courtney said, it contributes about 4 to 5% of emissions. And then we go back to the first step, I think, should be trying to mitigate these emissions to prevent further contribution to climate change. This can be achieved to increase the net zero systems for healthcare infrastructures, especially across developing countries whom are most vulnerable. For example, particularly in Nigeria, you have over 200 and you have over 150 million people who do not have access to basic healthcare services. These are people in rural communities who are most extreme to climate challenges, who are most extreme to heat, as well as health-related climate challenges such as respiratory, cardiovascular, amongst other health stresses. But a way forward, like I mentioned, in terms of integrating net zero systems to ensure that these healthcare systems reduce or mitigate their emissions. Secondly, in the angle of adaptation, it's very critical for increased healthcare or health system funding in these most vulnerable communities. This will help this percentage of people who do not have access to basic healthcare services, despite being exposed to extreme climate health related challenges, to be able to afford these services at their disposal. Then going back to the leadership in a climate activist, there Naomi mentioned a lot of challenges which cannot be overemphasized. But again, just to add up to that, we have other challenges which include challenges of not need to support from cycles, from process of cycles. You have accessibility gaps to information. Young people who are most passionate, who are pragmatic, who are anxious to make change and think about changes in their society, limits or inaccessibility to some information in terms of climate data, in terms of green technology. And that's why even at global climate conversations, you have technology transfer for global south and developing countries as critical. And young people who are central to this development or this climate justice play a key role in acquiring this information. But so far, it has really been a challenge, especially in developing countries where there is limited access to basic facilities that provide that enable access to these resources. Again, most importantly, funding is also another issue. It's really challenging to see young people who want to, make great impact in their society, and these young people have to fund some of these impacts from their first money in schools, and it's challenging, and that's again why increased access to climate funding, climate financing becomes critical.
Aliyu, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you speak a little bit louder? Because we can't hear you clearly.
Hi, Sonika, can you hear me?
Yes, better now.
Okay, apologies for that. So what I was basically saying in the last part of my statement was access for young people to funding to help drive climate solutions, locally led solutions in their communities. These are young people whom are most passionate, but this gap of funding becomes a challenge for them to be able to make the needed impact they need to make in their communities. In terms of the way forward, and advice for other young leaders would be consistency, take very good advantage of networking, because some of this information could actually and very be derived from networking. So that it's very, very essential for young people's growth and young people's impact and young people's development in their society. And then most again, maximizing impact by virtue of engaging in volunteering. It's about acquisition of knowledge while trying to impact on societies. I wouldn't want to write much on that. So I'll hand over to you, Sonika.
Thank you, Aliyu and Naomi, for touching the important topics like climate financing and mental health issues related to climate change. Following up on that, I would like to ask all three of you, how do you think that the collaboration between healthcare industry leaders and young leaders contribute to more sustainable and effective healthcare solutions? And if you have any examples of successful multi-stakeholders collaboration that you have effectively addressed healthcare concerns while incorporating young leaders, then please do share with us. And this is an open question for all of you, so feel free to jump in.
Shall I jump in? And thanks, Naomi and Aliyu. I agree with your comments and really loved what you had to say. I just wanted to share, because I think it's super relevant, that at AstraZeneca, I work on the side that looks after community giving. So it's how we look at nonprofit partnerships and support our communities around the world, which is, I think, the most interesting part of the business work. And maybe I'm biased. But we have a program called the Young Health Program, which is a charitable initiative where we work with nonprofits and young people all around the world, completely separate from our commercial business. It's how we contribute back to society. And it's all about how we can empower young people to manage their health. And we're doing a lot in the climate health space and are looking for incredible young health leaders and young climate activists. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. And if it sounds interesting, feel free to read more. But we have some young leaders that we have supported. So to give you some examples first, one of them created the first advocacy school for clean air in Latin America and trains young people to strengthen their capabilities to advocate for clean air. But then they use low-cost sensors to monitor air pollution in the communities. And they use that to support their advocacy work. That actually led to the Colombian government creating its first action plan for clean air. And it brought together organizations from over 7 countries to think together on how to promote clean air throughout the Latin American region. Another young leader that we support developed small-scale, low-cost portable systems in India that latch onto the back of tractors and pickup trucks. And they're deployed in remote, hard-to-access communities. It's an innovative technology that reduces the harmful effects of air pollution because the system locally converts biomass residues into high-value products like fertilizer blends, biofuels, and chemicals without any external energy input. And this supports closed-loop, self-sufficient rural communities and creates additional livelihood opportunities, while also reducing air pollution and carbon footprints associated with open air biomass burning, and ultimately improves public health outcomes. We provide support to young people who are coming up with climate health solutions in their communities in the form of grants, scholarships, mentorship, and development opportunities to help young people scale up their initiatives. And we want to support young people to drive a generation of health and climate advocacy work, speaking up on the health issues that matter to them and supporting them in testing out ideas that can have a positive impact on people and the environment within their communities. I truly believe that partnerships and youth-led advocacy and this community locally based approach is one of the most important ways that we can support young people and youth-serving organizations to catalyze change on a greater scale. So we have an annual opening for our youth fellowship program where we provide grants and scholarships and all kinds of other things that opens up early in the year. So I can put the link in chat and you'll have to check back when the announcement goes up and if it's something that you're interested in applying for. As I see that many of you are working for nonprofits and doing a lot of youth advocacy work, feel free to apply or reach out to me.
Thank you, Courtney. Aliyu, Naomi, if you have any comments on that, or if you want to add anything more.
Yeah, thank you so much, Courtney. Actually, I think that very example of what your organization is doing showcases the answer to the question that Sonika was asking, because having healthcare industry leaders and youth leaders collaborate can produce really profound impacts, because young leaders definitely have a deep-rooted understanding of, for example, digital tools, technology, social media, and that can be really critical for integrating healthcare solutions into a digital age. And then by doing that, we can help to increase sustainability by reducing the amount of waste produced in travel emissions. And not only that, but of course, I think it's no secret that young leaders are also very powerful advocates for not only climate issues, but also healthcare issues, and can raise awareness about public healthcare concerns in their own community spaces, globally, on social media, and through different grassroots movements that they have been showing to do currently and in the past. And when youth and healthcare leaders collaborate, it tends to foster a really wide range of perspectives, and really valuable intergenerational experiences can be represented. Like the very summit that we're in right now, having intergenerational discussions with healthcare industry leaders and youth leaders can produce a lot of different really important impacts, and then also has an opportunity for those different perspectives to be represented. And when those different perspectives are represented, it can help to reduce the number of disparities that we see in access to healthcare, right? Because a lot of marginalized groups tend to not really have the access to healthcare that they would like or that is needed. And by having these collaborations, that can help to reduce that. So I really just thank you, Courtney, for that explanation, that example that you gave. And I'll definitely be looking into it when the next announcement comes out.
Thank you, Naomi. Aliyu, you have anything to add?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Courtney, for that. Thanks, Naomi, for adding to that. So just giving a perspective from developing and vulnerable communities, I really feel like there's a gap between this health sector as well as young people who are innovating solutions. And Courtney gave some examples, but I'm bringing it back to these vulnerable communities. I really feel like going forward, a way to make this work, the healthcare sector needs to see themselves as an integral part of the environment, whereby there's partnership with innovators, young innovators coming up with solutions in the angle of water sector, in the angle of septic tanks that are much more eco-friendly, as well as even issues related to open defecation. These are all intersecting issues that affect public health, that affect human health, that also contributes to methane emissions. Just to give an example, my organization built toilets using plastic bottles as a way of circular economy, trying to address open defecation. And you would find out that there's more of support from the environmental sector rather than the health sector. So I think there should be an intersection and a nexus where health sector sees themselves as integral part of solving other related problems rather than just human health. It should be environment and human health because they are both interlinked. And thank you for what you do. Yeah, back to you, Sonika.
Thank you, Aliyu. Thank you, Courtney and Naomi, for the wonderful discussion. Now we have some questions from the participants I can see on the chat box. So I would like to quickly tell you the questions and you can jump in for answering them. So the first question is, how will gender equality be incorporated in the healthcare system fighting climate change?
Okay, so I am not a healthcare professional. I'm really only a youth climate leader and a youth climate activist. And I work, of course, with the Hey campaign. So I can't really speak to official things that would be implemented in the healthcare industry because that's not my field. But I would definitely say that that is a very important question because gender equality does definitely play a role when we're talking about healthcare equality and climate justice equality, because of course, it's no secret that of course there's disparities between access to healthcare for women and men. Women tend to not have the level of access to healthcare that they should, especially in marginalized communities, especially in Caribbean regions, in Latin America, in Africa as well. So those are really important things to consider when we're talking about reshaping how our healthcare sectors are functioning. Because if we want to create a sustainable and clean environment, and we want to create sustainable systems in the healthcare industry, we cannot overlook the problems that are already existing when we talk about access to healthcare for certain genders, when we talk about the difference in ways that healthcare problems impact different groups, and gender equality is definitely something that needs to be included there. So one of the suggestions that I could give to healthcare professionals or leaders in the healthcare industry is definitely to not only look at the ways that you can revamp your technology to make your systems more sustainable, but whilst you're doing that, include professionals that work in sociology, in gender studies, in studies that in international relations, for example, as well, so that you can see the difference in how climate and health issues impacts the global South versus the global North. So all of these things are really important when you talk about reshaping how the healthcare industry functions. So yeah, that would be my answer to that question. But like I said, I cannot give a concrete answer on what would be implemented because I'm not a healthcare professional.
Thank you for that, Naomi. That's a very important issue, and thank you for responding it in detail. So we have next question. The question is, in the Caribbean, especially small island states, which are vulnerable to climate change, how can we address the issue of Sahara dust that affect asthma patients and clean air? How can green technology address such issues?
I mean, I can jump in and just say that I'm not an expert on the situation in Caribbean island states. I'm very much a generalist, but I do strongly feel that local issues should be driven by local solutions, and local communities should be the ones to really come up with the ways to solve the challenges that are happening in their own communities. Of course, there are things that we can learn and take from large global organizations, but I really think a sustainable development approach is by listening to the people on the ground and the organizations on the ground, and helping them come up with the solutions that will work in their community and in their context.
Thanks, Courtney. If there are any more questions, please type on the chat box. Now we are towards the end of the opening session, so any questions that you have will be addressed by our panelists in the chat itself. So I would like to close the opening session for today, but we have other sessions, so stick with us. And having said that, I would like to thank all of our panelists for the wonderful discussion today. And I hope our participants were informed about lots of things, and they were benefited from today's discussion, because I was. And so thank you, panelists, thank you, participants, for joining. And I would like to hand over the session once again to Ashley for initiating the next session. Thank you.
Wow, what an amazing panel, don't you agree, everyone? Thank you all for an insightful, opening, intergenerational panel discussion. I must say you guys were fantastic.